Hello and welcome to the World Wanders podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Audible. And our book recommendation for this week is one of my favorite travel books that I've actually read a couple times. It's called The Lost Girls by 3 different authors who co-wrote the book based on a trip that they took together and other different trips. And just the way that travel really changed their lives. And it was something that I read when I was first starting out to travel, and it just really touched me in a meaningful way. So if you'd like to check out that book, you can get the book for free and your first month free through The World Wanders at audibletrial.com/The World Wanders.
This week on the podcast, we are going to be going turbo speed and talking about every single country we've been to since we became adults.
Yeah, and it's important to note that since we became adults, I traveled a little bit with my family when I was younger, and we're going to skip a couple of those countries. So in total, we've got 40 countries that we're going to talk about, and we're going to go through them alphabetically from A through till Z to talk about just sort of our favorite thing about them. So it's going to be very fast-paced. It's going to be quick little snippets of the country and just kind of the highlights and what we would recommend if you were there.
Yeah, so highlights, perhaps lowlights, and a recommendation from each spot.
Exactly.
All right. Do you want to kick it off?
Yeah. So the first country that we're going to talk about is Argentina.
Or Argentina for our Spanish listeners.
And that's fun. So we went to Argentina on our 6-month backpacking trip in South America, and it was country number 5 on our trip. So we had been traveling for about 4 months at that point, and we were pretty comfortable in South America, but arriving in Argentina was super, super awesome. We arrived into Buenos Aires, which is one of the coolest cities I think I've ever been to, and we stayed there for a couple of weeks, which was pretty amazing. And so I would say that Buenos Aires is 100% one of my recommendations. I mean, I could make an entire list of things that you could do in that city that are just so fun, and cool restaurants and that sort of thing. So that city is probably my favorite part about being there.
Yeah, and then we were doing Spanish school there, and from Buenos Aires we went down to Ushuaia and then kind of hopscotch back and forth between Chile and Argentina up to Patagonia. We went to Bariloche. Mm-hmm. What's the other? El Calafate.
Yeah.
Saw the glacier there, and then eventually Mendoza, Salta, Jujuy. Before crossing out of the country.
Yeah, and so what was one of the highlights for you?
I mean, Buenos Aires was just like an awesome city to be in, and to have, after traveling a couple weeks there and just kind of settle in, like that was definitely something that sticks out in my mind. Seeing the gigantic glacier at Perito Moreno is definitely something worth going and checking out. And yeah, other than that, empanadas, they stick out to me.
All the wine.
Wine as well, empanadas and wine.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because I'm pretty big fan of wine at home, and I found that I actually didn't drink much wine in South America. It was more kind of like, I guess, a beer and hard liquor culture in some of the other countries. There's things like pisco sour in Peru that are popular and that sort of thing. So I was really excited to get there, and it was all about the wine. So if you're a wine drinker or a wine lover, definitely go to Argentina.
Yeah. So next on the list is Australia.
Yeah, I mean...
G'day, Australia.
Good day, mate.
So we went to Australia in 2011. It was almost near the end of our 6-month backpacking trip. We came over from Southeast Asia, arrived in Melbourne, and I actually have some family in Melbourne and had visited them when I was a child. So they were kind enough to come pick us up, to host us when we were in Melbourne, and kind of like nurse us back to health after our Southeast Asian encounters with all sorts of weird stomach issues.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. I remember we hadn't had great Wi-Fi throughout Southeast Asia, so we both talked with our parents, and I distinctly remember my mom being like, make sure you empty your bag outside, like don't get bugs in these poor people's homes who have like taken you in and like are offering to, you know, host you. And I was like, I'm not that gross, like wash my clothes.
Yeah, and so we rented a juicy van in Melbourne and drove that bad boy all the way up to Cairns.
Cans. Yeah. And so one of the things that I loved most about Australia, outside of being in the van, because the van itself was such a cool experience. I felt like I was like discovering my like, I don't know, inner hippie or something like that. I'd never imagined myself like living in a van for 6 weeks. But the Whit Sundays were probably one of my favorite experiences as we made our way up the coast. And we went to Whitehaven Beach, and it has some of the most beautiful white sand that I think in the world, and beautiful aquamarine water. And it's just such a spectacular day.
Yeah, it was really fun living out of a van. And it was kind of funny because we'd been backpacking for so long that it was almost like, it's funny because I think a lot of people would say like living out of a van for 6 weeks, that might be hard from a space perspective. But for us, it was kind of like, oh, wow, we can put our shit everywhere. Like, let's expand. I remember at the end, we were like, oh, God, we got to fit this all back into backpacks.
Right. Yeah. And it reminds me of talking to Shelly and Al McCullough, who from Sell All Your Stuff, how they're just like, when you have space, you buy stuff and expand into it. And I feel like that was totally us in our van. But I remember just being like, yes, I don't have to carry this backpack around. Like, this is so great. Like, I didn't pick it up for basically like 6 weeks, and it was just so like heavenly.
Yeah. And thankfully we didn't crash the car after adjusting to the other side of the road.
Yeah, thankfully.
It's just kind of funny because they just give you the keys and they're like, here you go. And you're like, okay.
I'm like, does it work that we turn left on red lights? Is that kosher? Can we do that? Is that a legal thing? I still don't know the answer to that. And I drove for 6 weeks.
So what's your recommendation for Australia?
Whit Sundays. Already gave it. What's yours?
Mine is going to be slightly more specific, but there was a chain of burger restaurants called Grilled.
Oh, yeah.
That was really legit. I don't know if something's changed over the past 5 years, but at the time it was awesome, and it definitely worth checking out if you're there.
Yeah. They have really, really good burgers, lots of different variety, gluten-free buns, which are amazing.
Yeah, especially at that time.
I think I have to note, though, like, if you are scuba dive certified, like PADI certified, going and scuba diving in the Great Barrier Reef is kind of one of those things that you're like, holy shit, I'm doing this. So I'd also add that to the list.
What do you mean it's one of those things? Aren't most things where you're like, oh, I'm doing this?
Yeah, no, definitely. But that was one of those. Like,
no, but I just meant like, what does that mean? Where you're like, holy shit, I'm doing this.
Like, you just hear so much about
like
how
it's almost surreal.
Yeah, like the Great Barrier Reef is this like thing that people talk about, and it's supposed to be like the best reef to dive in the world. And I just felt like it was so cool to be there and to see how big the reef was. Like, it's massive, and we just dived small portions of it. And I mean, diving in general is spectacular. Seeing all the fish and the animals and the Nemos and like all that sort of stuff was really, really cool.
Yes. So next up on the list is Austria.
Yeah. And so we went to Austria as part of our European backpacking part of our 2011 trip. And Ryan has actually been a second time. So we've had different experiences in Austria. The first time we went together, we went to Salzburg, and that's basically my only experience in Austria. Getting out of the city and getting views of the Swiss and Austrian Alps is probably one of the things that I loved most about being there. Like, just the scenery and how spectacular nature is there.
Yeah, it's one of the most picturesque places we've ever been. The mountains are just gigantic, and there's these meadows and fields. Sound of Music's from there, so it lives up to that. And it was kind of funny because we were staying at a hostel that had Sound of Music playing. Was it like twice a week, or was it like every other night?
Yeah, I think it was like every other night. Or
when I'd never actually seen it before, so the only time I've watched it was in Salzburg.
Yeah.
And then on my trip to Central America last year.
Central Europe,
yes.
I'm assuming you didn't go to Austria when you went to Central America.
Vienna, my trip to Central America. Yeah, I went from Prague to Vienna, and then Vienna down to Ljubljana, Slovenia, and spent 2 days in Vienna, and it just like blew me away. Like, in Salzburg, you've kind of got your like mouth agape because you're staring at these picturesque mountains, and in Vienna, there's just like these gigantic palaces and huge like royal looking buildings all over the place. Has a really cool cafe scene. you're able to get some good German foods.
Austrian foods.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Austrian foods.
Yeah.
They're around. Very cool city though, and someplace I'd love to go back.
Yeah. And one thing I want to say that was kind of a downside to our time in Salzburg is arriving on a Sunday. There was basically nothing open when we arrived on the Sunday. We didn't really have many groceries, and there weren't many. I mean, basically I had no groceries, and there wasn't really anything open. And so just word to the wise that if you're going to go there, just being aware that Sunday is still a very traditionally a traditional day in the sense that people don't really keep their businesses open.
Yeah, I think it might actually be a rule where you're not allowed to have your business open unless you're the one Sunday we were able to get food from kind of an Arabic market.
Yeah.
So I think it might actually be a rule. What's your recommendation for Austria?
I would say go to Salzburg. Check out everything having to do with the sound of music because it's super cool. And then make sure you get out of the city and check out the Alps.
Yeah, and my recommendation is if you want, the salt mines are cool. I think there's one, we went to one that was just super corny and there's all these animatronic salt mining dudes and it's just super cheesy. So if you're going to the salt mines, check it out and make sure you don't go to that one.
Yeah, the salt mines are a cool thing though. But the reason why I liked the salt mines is because we got out of the city and were able to see the countryside and walk around a little bit, which was really neat. Moving into B's. So our first B is Belgium. And we didn't really spend much time in Belgium.
It's kind of cheating to put this on the list.
But we had a stopover in Belgium and we stopped in Brussels and we had kind of a train layover. And it was really early in the morning, but we bought all the chocolate and ate the chocolate basically for breakfast. And so I can't really speak too much to Belgium or Brussels because we haven't had a full-on experience there. But I would say that if you're there, indulge. The chocolate, the waffles, all the stuff that they're known for, it's known for a reason.
Well, we didn't even eat waffles, so we can't really speak on that.
I'm gluten-free, so.
Yeah. So my recommendation for Belgium is to go to Belgium if you're going to go.
So if you were to have done that again, would you have stayed longer?
No.
What?
Well, we were going to Amsterdam. I'd rather be in Amsterdam.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, I would say stay longer. The way that I like to travel now is to spend a little bit longer in places and to not just, pass through. So knowing how good the chocolate was, I would have really liked to experience some more of Brussels.
Yeah. Okay. What's next?
Bolivia. And so we went to Bolivia on our South America trip, and it was our second last country in South America that we went to. The last one was Peru. And we had heard that, everyone gets sick in Bolivia, be prepared for it. I don't know what we were thinking. Maybe we've been here long enough that we won't get sick, but both of us got sick. And so that can always put a damper on your trip. Being sick, especially in a hostel, can just be really, really rough. But I think that you learn and you grow from those things, and both of us are okay now. Obviously, it's just a little bit of a 24-hour food poisoning thing, but be cautious of that if you're going to Bolivia.
Yeah, and so our trip in Bolivia was from Atacama in Chile through Uyuni, Salt Flats, stayed in Uyuni for a moment.
Half a sec.
Then went over to Potosi, Sucre, stayed in Sucre for a little bit longer. Sucre, La Paz, out. No, Titicaca.
Ruanabaque.
Ruanabaque and then Titicaca. So yeah, we actually did quite a few stops in Bolivia.
Yeah, we did. And so I think one of the highlights for me was the Salt Flats. It's something that I'd seen so many photos of, and I was so excited to get there. And the Jeep tour was long. It was a lot of time in a Jeep. I don't regret it though. I don't know if I would do the full trip again, but I don't regret it. And I had a lot of fun doing it. And I think that last day, getting out for the sunrise on the Cactus Island and seeing the Salt Flats was such a cool moment for me. And I would 100% recommend getting out to the Salt Flats, either going from Uyuni just to see the Salt Flats or doing the entire trip.
Yeah, definitely. That sticks out in my mind. There's in Potosi's really known for an experience where you can go to a mine that used to operate. Potosi at one point was one of the I think it was the largest city in the Western Hemisphere because there was gigantic silver mine there and it's still operating. And it's a little bit of a crazy place because you can go on this tour of this mine that's kind of still operating, and like miners will kind of show you around and you can like blow stuff up. And it sounds like generally quite unsafe. So we went to Potosi and decided not to do that.
So are you just talking about that, or are you saying you would recommend that?
Oh, no, I wouldn't recommend that.
Okay, I was going to say, I don't really know that that's ethical tourism.
Just putting it out there.
Okay.
That's a thing
Yes.
that people do. And so I probably wouldn't have gone to Potosi. We were kind of unsure if we were going to do this or not.
Right.
Yeah, and on the Uyuni standpoint, I think that the kind of conventional thing is, oh, you should do this Uyuni to Atacama trip. It's like the thing that's firmly rooted on the Gringo Trail. I think you can get almost as much enjoyment out of just showing up in Uyuni, Bolivia, and then getting a trip out to the salt flats from there. Being out there for sunrise is super cool. And I know a lot of the trips that leave from Uyuni go a little bit later, so you don't get that. But if you can find a trip that just goes out, does the salt flats from Uyuni, that's like 90% of the enjoyment out of the adventure across to Atacama.
Right. I think though there's like massive growth in spending like 3 days in a van and sleeping in really like, or in a Jeep and sleeping in like really basic cold accommodation. Like it was unpleasant in a lot of ways and the food was not good. But I think that for me, that was like, it was so out of my comfort zone. And I think that that's where I really grow. So I would say I would encourage people to do that trip.
Yeah. Okay.
What was your highlight though?
The highlight, this is kind of like hyped up as like the thing to do, especially in La Paz, but the Death Road, biking really lives up to the hype. Like it's so cool. Like that was my favorite experience. You start up super high in the mountains. I think you're over 5,000 meters. So that's like way above the tree line. And by the time you end, you're down in the jungle and it gets hot and it's just like an amazing bike ride. The road's wide enough that when you're on a bike, you feel pretty safe. Would you say so? You were less experienced as a biker.
Yeah. I think all of my mountain biking experiences actually came from South America. So really not an experienced mountain biker at all. And I felt pretty safe with it. Like the road is really small if you try to think about two vehicles, like one coming up, one going down. But when you think about being on a bike, you actually have so much space. And I mean, I was a bit more cautious than some people who are ripping down the mountain. But I never felt like my life was actually in danger in any ways. I had a lot of fun. It was pretty adrenaline heavy for me, but it was good. Yeah,
so that definitely on the must-do list. And then if I can, for a second recommendation, Sucre in Bolivia would be a great place to kind of kick off your trip and do Spanish school. I know that's what we kind of thought about doing, and a lot of people will go to Quito, a lot of people go to Buenos Aires. Sucre is really affordable, quite a nice city. Some good Spanish schools there. That's a great place to spend like 2-3 weeks at the start of your trip and save a bunch of money and kick off your Spanish adventure.
Yeah. I think that we could continue talking about recommendations for Bolivia, but we want to keep this pretty quick. So going to move on to Brazil. And Brazil, we went to, it was our third country on our South America trip. We went from Ecuador over to Brazil, which is kind of an unconventional route, but we were going over for Carnival and we had already booked a tour and accommodation and stuff for Carnival. And from there, we did about a month in Brazil. And the Carnival experience itself was cool. But I think that I actually really just loved Rio de Janeiro. I thought it was one of the coolest cities that I've been to. It's like the culture is cool. There's
diversity of stuff you can do.
It's like such an eccentric city. Like there's really beautiful people, massive gay population. There's poverty, there's rich people. It's just, there's so much stuff that stimulates your senses constantly. And then there's also so much cool stuff to see and do, from going to the beaches to going out to the nightclubs to going up to Christ the Redeemer, Sugarloaf Mountain, massive, massive amounts of things to do. And sometimes we go to cities and it's like, there's a lot of touristy stuff to do that we've done. And we're like, okay, it's kind of like, it's good, but it's not great, or it's like meh. And I felt like everything we did in Rio was like really fun and really cool. Even going to we went on a favela tour and seeing obviously it's like set up for tourists to come through, and I understand that, but being able to see that the way that those people live was really interesting.
And so from Rio, we went up to Salvador. No, we didn't. We went to, what's that place called? Buzios,
Itacare, and then up to Salvador.
Yeah, and then from Salvador over to Iguassu Falls, from Iguassu Falls down to Floripa on a mega bus ride.
Florianopolis.
Floripa.
Same.
And Floripa,
just
a long bus ride
Uruguay.
with a connection through some city.
It doesn't
in
matter.
Brazil. Yeah, so what's your recommendation for Brazil? Is it Rio? Go to Rio, spend more time in
I think
Rio?
that Rio is definitely one of them. I couldn't speak more highly of that city. I think that it's really, really cool, and I would definitely recommend it. Iguassu Falls as well was a highlight of all of South America for me. I loved Iguassu Falls. It was breathtaking, jaw-dropping. Like, it's the coolest waterfall I've ever seen. So I would 100% go there, and I would spend 2 days the way we did, one on the Brazil side and one on the Argentina side.
Yeah, and for me, I would say Brazil is a super cool country and definitely worth visiting. But something to consider if you're planning a big South American backpacking trip, especially depending on where you're from and how much the visa is. If you're Canadian, American, it's kind of a hassle to get a Brazilian visa. And when you're in Brazil, it's expensive relative to the other countries and a bit of a hassle to get around. So if I was talking to myself before going to South America, I would be like, Ryan, save Brazil for later. Spend your time in these Spanish-speaking countries, save a bit of money, travel a bit longer, keep improving your Spanish.
Okay. Interesting. So the next country that's on the list is Canada. Are we going to touch on that since it's our home country?
Is it possible to travel to Canada if we're from Canada?
Why is it not possible to travel through the country that you're from?
What was it traveling?
How is it not traveling?
I don't know. It's kind of like a tree fell in the forest kind of question. But since we're here, my recommendation for Canada, if you were to come here and want to spend some time doing something, driving from Vancouver to Calgary or Calgary to Vancouver, I think that's the best part of Canada. Depends on if you're into like cities, that kind of thing. I would maybe do Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec City.
Mm-hmm.
If you're more into like badass mountains, cool rivers, cool scenery, Vancouver to Calgary or the other way around, and with, of course, taking the scenic route.
Right. Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I would say going through the national parks between British Columbia and Alberta are really amazing. So the western part of Alberta, starting with Banff National Park into Yoho National Park where Jasper is, Kootenay National Park, going down into the Canadian version of Glacier National Park and Waterton over to Vancouver Island. There's so much amazing stuff in there. So, but maybe we're biased because we're from the West.
Probably.
Yeah. So moving on, the next country is Cambodia.
Oh, Cambodia. So when we went to Cambodia, we were in Bangkok, arrived in Bangkok. We didn't really have a plan for what we were going to do, and it was rainy season. It was like flooding everywhere, and we were like, oh my God, we're going to die. Where can we go? We wanted to go to northern Thailand. It was like apparently off the table. So we decided, we're going to go over to Siem Reap in Cambodia. And that border crossing is like the sketchiest thing. But it was like super sketchy, but thank God for the internet, we were able to navigate it quickly. You can check out our Cambodia episode for more on that. So we went Siem Reap, Phnom Penh, and then out.
Yeah, so I feel like our experiences in Cambodia are fairly minimal. The thing that I would recommend is Angkor Wat. It's, it lives up to the things that people talk about and say about it, and the photos that you can get are spectacular. Not that travel should just be about taking photos, but it's really, really cool to see the ancient set of ruins and learn about that area of the world.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that as a location. Like, it was just a spectacular place. My recommendation for Cambodia would be to learn a little bit about the history before going. So specifically the history of Angkor, that civilization, and what exactly people think happened at the Temple of Angkor, why it was built. People think it was a gigantic city, But then also the Khmer Rouge period in Cambodia and the atrocities that happened there, because when you go to Cambodia, it's a pretty difficult place to travel. There's a lot of people begging, a lot of poverty, and a lot of people who look like they've suffered a lot. And,
right. There's a lot of there's a massive child sex trade industry there as well.
Yeah,
which
so
makes it I don't think we saw too much about that, but it's just, it makes it hard to go there and give money towards, that government that's really not helping these people who are suffering.
It's one of the most corrupt governments in the world. But there's a movie called The Killing Fields, which would be a good place to start and get a taste of that history, just kind of to have an understanding of some of the things that have happened there and to kind of put your trip into context.
Yeah, definitely. And so moving on, we're going into Chile. And Chile was a country that we kind of came in and out of a bunch of times, as Ryan mentioned before with Argentina. It's long and skinny on the West Coast, if you're not geographically knowledgeable about where it is. And so we kind of jumped back and forth so that we were able to make our way up through both Chile and Argentina, since they're neighboring countries, and it just seemed to make the most sense to us. We went from the Patagonia area of Chile up to Santiago, where I actually have a relative. My mom's cousin lives up there.
Shout out.
And it was super, super cool to stay with her. So Karen, if you're listening, thank you so much for your hospitality on that trip. She really made Santiago for us. It wasn't just another city. It was a pretty cool experience. And then from there, we kind of weaved back and forth through Argentina to get up to San Pedro de Atacama.
And one of the day trips we did from Santiago was to Valparaiso. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but really cool city on the coast, kind of directly west of Santiago. And we were only there for a day, but it looked like a super cool city, and I would have loved to stay there for a little bit and check it out. It's a big student city, cool art, culture, stuff like that. So my recommendation for Chile, I need a moment to think about it. What's yours?
San Pedro de Atacama, for sure. Going up there I had heard that it was going to planet Mars, and I haven't been to Mars, obviously, but I feel like it was going to another planet. It's no place I've ever seen on Earth, and the colors were spectacular. The climate was different. We saw the Moon Valley and the Sun Valley, and went to a lake that was so full of salt water that you just floated, and we did lots of really cool stuff there, and the scenery was so spectacular that I would definitely recommend getting up there because it's just so unique. Yeah,
and my recommendation is also for Atacama. A lot of the activities are about going and exploring stuff during the day, but one of the coolest things I thought was just the sky at night. The stars were unbelievable. So just hopping on a bike or something, pedaling a little bit out of town, or having a car or something like that, going out at night to a place where it's completely dark and checking out the sky, but would be an awesome experience.
Yeah, and so moving on, our next country is Colombia, and we've done an episode on Colombia, so you should definitely check that out, as we'll rave all about it. But Colombia was our first stop in South America, and the only reason we booked our flight there is because Bogota was the cheapest place to fly from Canada. It's a really quick flight from Toronto, and it's really affordable, so that's the reason we went down there. We had basically no expectations because people had basically warned us that we were going to get stolen or killed or something there. And we had such an opposite experience to that. It was so pleasant and wonderful. And so we flew into Bogota. We spent a couple days in Bogota and then made our way north via a bus to Santa Marta. And from Santa Marta, we made our way west to Cartagena. And then from Cartagena, we made our way down to Medellin, which we've talked a lot about. And from Medellin, we took a kind of a weekend trip, I guess, to Salento and then back to Medellin before flying to Ecuador. And what would you recommend for Colombia?
I think my recommendation would be the patacones in Salento.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what a patacone is for somebody who's I don't know what he just said?
So fried plantain, they smash it out. And in Salento, they kind of make it into a pizza almost, where they'll flatten it really thinly and put toppings on top of it. And I think they fry it, and it's just awesome.
Yeah. So I have two recommendations. One is just going to Medellin in general. Just go there, enjoy, take the city in. It's amazing. And then the second one is going to Salento and doing the Valle de Concora hike, where you can see the 80-foot palm trees, because that's kind of like out of this world and pretty cool. And so the next country is the Czech Republic. And it's actually really interesting because we've both been to the Czech Republic, but we actually didn't go together. I went with a couple girls that I lived with in university, and Ryan went solo on his backpacking trip to Central Europe last year.
Yeah. So when I went to Central Europe, I flew into Prague and then left the country and then came back in and went to Olomouc, and then Czeski Krumlov, and then Prague again. Spent the majority of my time right in Prague.
And so what would you recommend from that trip?
I really fell in love with Czeski Krumlov. That town is just like stunningly picturesque. I went in the winter, or actually the spring, which was really cool because it was super low season, super quiet there. The occasional like tour bus full of people you'd run into, but other than that, you're just like alone, and it's just an amazing place. So that's definitely got to be on your list if you're going there. And then in Prague, there is some really cool cafes and restaurants. There's one called Cafe Anonymous, which is kind of like a V for Vendetta themed cafe. And there's another one, which is like a cafe in a building called Paralleli Polis that only accepts Bitcoin. So that's also a really cool experience. So those are my couple recommendations for Czech Republic.
Nice. Yeah, I would say I only went to Prague and I just spent a couple days there, but I'd say do some form of like tour, like a biking, walking, boat tour, something like that, where you can really learn the history of the city, because there's a lot of interesting things that you can learn about that you don't really get to understand if you're just kind of exploring on your own. Like, for example, they bury their dead one on top of each other, or they used to bury their dead one on top of each other, and you can go check that. You can go check that stuff out, which is really, really cool.
Awesome. So the next country on the list is Ecuador.
Yeah, and we went to Ecuador in 2014 when we were in South America, and we went there right after Colombia. So it's kind of timely since we just talked about Colombia. We flew into Quito, and we spent quite a bit of time in Quito before flying to the Galapagos Islands, and then flying back and going to Cuenca, and then coming back to Quito. And we spent quite a bit of time kind of exploring the exterior stuff around Quito, which I think was probably my favorite parts about being there. Yeah,
Ecuador is a really... I think it's a really popular backpacking country, really cool place. There's a lot of cool stuff to do, and we didn't get out and like get a chance to do much of the mainland stuff. Galapagos is awesome, and then Quito's kind of just like it's like another big city in South America. But the one great thing that Ecuador has going for it is just the cost of living. It's super affordable, and I know Quito is a very popular place for people to do Spanish school.
Yeah, and so what would you recommend?
I would recommend, yeah, sure. I'll just like shoot from the hip. If I would spend more time in Colombia or in Peru instead of like being in Ecuador, is what I would do. But I haven't been to a ton of places. So.
Right. I don't know that I would agree with that recommendation. I think when you don't necessarily love a place, it's like figuring out what you don't love. And I think the thing that I didn't love was the city of Quito. I don't think that there was anything else that I didn't love about Ecuador. Yet being in Quito for so long gave me like Ecuador wasn't really my favorite country. It was probably actually my least favorite country when we traveled South America. But the Galapagos Islands is so, so, so amazing. Like seeing those giant tortoises is something that I'll never forget in my lifetime. It was such an amazing experience. And then I also loved going outside of Quito, like I said before, and the Quilotoa crater was one of, I think, the coolest things that we did there. It's just a giant, beautiful turquoise crater that's like kind of in the middle of the countryside. And so if you're going to be in Ecuador, I would definitely explore the areas that are not Quito. Give Quito a chance, figure out your own opinion about it, but definitely get out of the city.
Yeah. So up next on the list is England, which was actually somewhere we went on our first backpacking trip right after Iceland. So one of the very first places together. And Amanda had already been with her family.
And I've been since then as well.
Oh yeah, you've been back as well. So our time together there was basically just confined to London before heading off to Scotland.
Yeah, definitely. I've also been to Bath and Stonehenge, but haven't really explored much of the English countryside, which I think would be really, really cool to do. I think that my recommendation for London is to go see Big Ben and the Parliament buildings, because I love Big Ben. I don't know, I've got some like weird obsession with that building, that clock tower. I just think it's so cool. London is one of those cities that I got there and was like, yeah, give me more of this. I'm kind of a little bit obsessed.
Yeah, and when we were there, we were actually able to go to Wimbledon, which was really cool, to experience something that you've seen on TV, and then you're like sitting right there next to professional tennis players on these grass courts, and having a really like hoity-toity experience.
Yeah, strawberries and cream that we can't afford. So what would you recommend?
My recommendation would probably be to go. There's just a ton of cool events that happen in and around London, so to maybe time your thing around that, like maybe going to a big football game or something like Wimbledon, and then just enjoying the pub culture.
I was going to say, are you not going to mention fish and chips and beer? We ate so much like fish and chips, and I drank cider, I drank beer, and that's like a really fun thing to do if you're in London specifically. And so the next country on the list is France, and I've been to France twice. Ryan's been once, and the first time I just went to Paris, and the second time when we were in backpacking Europe in 2011, we went to Bordeaux and then
Bordeaux.
Oh, Bordeaux, right. There's a hike in Banff called Bordeaux. I just got confused. Bordeaux and then France. And I don't know, Paris is like the city that everyone talks about, yet it's not one of my favorites, even after being there twice.
Yeah, you don't like it?
No, I like it. It's just not one of my favorites.
So I found it like a bit tough as a backpacker. I feel like if we were rich, it might be more enjoyable.
It's a fair statement.
Like getting around in the metro's not really nice. Hostels are super expensive.
Food's really expensive.
So it wasn't like the greatest as a backpacker. But that said, like going out and seeing the Eiffel Tower, walking around some of the areas of the city and seeing like the old architecture and old churches and stuff, that was pretty impressive for me. As well as hearing, I remember distinctly we did a walking tour there where they kind of talked about a lot of World War II history. That was also really interesting.
Yeah. And so what would you recommend about France?
Yeah, nothing like pops to my mind immediately.
I think that's something that I would recommend would be doing one of those walking tours.
Yeah.
And we did them through New Europe, and they're by donation tours. And I thought it was a really good way to get a sense for the city and to really start appreciating it. And then, of course, going up the Eiffel Tower is amazing. And if you're on a budget like we were the second time, you can actually walk up, and it's a lot more affordable. Yeah.
And my only recommendation, I guess, would be try to walk around as much as possible and avoid the metro. Mm-hmm. I know our first day there, we were in the metro the whole time. And then later on, we kind of had a time where we spent like 3-4 hours outside walking from place to place. And that's when I was like, wow, this is really a beautiful city.
Yeah, definitely.
So next up is Germany.
Oktoberfest.
So we proceeded from Amsterdam to Germany, same trip, and went to Berlin. Actually, we went to Dusseldorf, Berlin, and Munich.
Yeah, and then I've also been to Frankfurt, yeah. Why did I say Hungary? I've not been to Hungary.
Frankfurter, hot dog, Hungary.
Maybe I'm hungry. Yeah, I've also been to Frankfurt, which is not a place that I would highly recommend. But I really, really enjoyed both times I went to Munich. I think that Munich's probably one of my favorite cities in Germany that I've been to. And Berlin is cool as well. Like, obviously, all the history there is so neat. And that's what I would definitely recommend, is checking out the World War II history and, again, doing a walking tour, especially in Berlin and Munich.
Yeah, the history stands out in Germany.
Like checking out the Berlin Wall. And it's actually really cool. I work with a girl who's from Germany, and she was born in 1987 or something like that. And she was telling me how she was born in East Germany and how she was like born before the Berlin Wall came down. And I was like, wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, I remember the walking tour we did there was just like an amazing tour because it had so much World War II history and plus all this communist history. Just like probably the best one we've ever been on. And then my highlight for Germany is just like big beer gardens and big soft pretzels or Lagenbrezel as they're called. They're one of my favorite food, and I love them so much.
Okay, so the next place we're going to talk about is Gibraltar.
Yeah, Gibraltar's kind of debatably not a country.
But it's like a cool place that's kind of got its own. And so it's near sort of like the southern tip of France. Where is it? Oh, sorry, Spain. Yeah, I was like, why are you correcting me? That's right. No, Spain. I was thinking Spain. I said France. I'm all confused now. And you kind of like cross into a separate area, which kind of makes us feel like it's a different place. Like they give you a passport stamp and everything. It's really, really massive rock for people who don't know. And basically you go in and they use the pound instead of the euro.
Yeah, it's a British territory.
Mm-hmm. And so you cross this border and basically the currency changes. All of a sudden the language isn't Spanish anymore. Everything's in English again. And it's basically like you've walked into an English territory.
Yeah, there's the red phone booths, the funny mailboxes, British people, but they're all like lobstered because of the sun.
Yeah, because it's really warm
Pubs.
there. And I think that in general, I would recommend going to Gibraltar because it's a really interesting, cool place. It was a highlight for sure in our European trip. And we did it on our own, which was really awesome. We hiked up, we hiked around. There's maps and signs. It's really accessible. We saw the monkeys. And if you're on a budget, I would definitely just do it yourself and hike the mountain.
Yeah. And so what's your recommendation first?
I think just go to Gibraltar, hike the rock for sure.
So for my side, I think if you've been traveling around Spain for a long time, going to like a big English supermarket is kind of fun.
Yeah, that was great.
That was a really good experience for us. And then the Mediterranean steps on Gibraltar, it kind of goes down the backside, and they're very busy at like the top and certain spots on Gibraltar. But then walking that walk, I think we only saw like a couple people, and it was just like stunning view of the ocean. This cool like hike down the backside of the rock. So that's definitely an awesome thing to check out while you're there.
Yeah, for sure. And our final country in G is Greece. And Greece was the last country that we went to on the European part of our 2011 backpacking trip. And we booked a Kentucky tour to do an island hopping tour. So we went from Athens to, what was our first stop? Mykonos to Santorini to Ios. And then from Ios, we made our way back to Athens. And so we did kind of like a 2-week loop there. And I mean, I loved Greece. Greece is like, Greece and Spain, I think and Switzerland were my favorite countries in Europe on that trip. And the ocean, the Mediterranean, the food, oh my God, the food, everything was so wonderful in Greece.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because we'd heard a lot of people kind of talk negatively about Athens before going, and then definitely sketchy, no doubt about that. But the food and the history there totally outweigh the negative side of it for me. So love that. And the Greek islands, totally different world. Some of the most amazingly scenic places ever. So yeah, we had a blast on all of those islands.
Yeah. And so what would you recommend?
I just mean like gorge yourself on food. It's like, it's hard to go wrong. Like the Greek food is so good, especially in Greece.
Yeah, especially in Greece. It's like, I don't know. I feel like Greek food and Thai food are just not the same in Canada and the US. They're just not as good. It's really hard to find as good a food. And part of that is that like in Santorini, they use like Santorini tomatoes that are grown locally, and you can get unpasteurized feta. So it's just like a little bit better. And yeah, the food is amazing. So I definitely echo that. And then I would say going and seeing the Pantheon was really cool. Parthenon?
I can't remember.
No, it's the Pantheon.
At the Acropolis?
Yeah. Yeah, going to check out the history of Greece, because it's this thing you hear about, like Roman history and you hear about Greek history, and like Greece is so old.
Yeah, I remember being kind of like mind boggled because we'd been through Europe and seen all this stuff in France. You're like, wow, that's old. Then you go to Rome and you're like, wow, that's even older. Like, it's old. And you go to Greece and then you're there and you're like, it's just like mind boggling that it's like the difference between like Greece history and like France history is like thousands of years, and you're like, it's just mind-boggling.
Totally, yeah. And then I also loved Santorini. I think Santorini was my favorite island that we went to, and so I would highly recommend going there. Pay $5 to ride a donkey up the caldera.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
It's terrifying, but it's awesome.
So next on our list is Hungary.
Yeah, and I actually haven't been to
Which
Hungary.
Amanda can relate to.
Yeah,
because she's currently hungry.
I'm always hungry. But I actually haven't been to Hungary, so Ryan's going to field this one.
So I went in 2015 on my Central European backpacking trip. I've been from Slovenia, and the only place I went was Budapest, and I think I spent about a week there. Budapest is a really cool city, and it's becoming more and more popular, especially as a remote work destination. And once again, just really cool history between like World War stuff, communist stuff, and then current day events, beautiful architecture, beautiful river, just a cool place to be. And so one of the most popular things to do at Budapest is to go out and party. They have these cool like ruin bars of these old like apartment buildings that have been turned into bars. But at the time I wasn't drinking, so I didn't get to experience any of that. But my recommendation would just be to stay a while, enjoy the city. It's a great place to kind of like chill out and spend a couple weeks. And then if you're looking for a thing to do that's maybe not as common, going at night across the river from the parliament and that stuff, and walking that side of the river and just seeing like all those buildings lit up is a really, really cool experience.
Yeah. And so moving into the next country, it's Iceland. And Iceland was the first country that Ryan and I traveled together on our 2011 backpacking trip. And we actually only booked our flights to Iceland because Iceland Air does really cheap deals over to Europe. And you can actually set your layover for however long you want. And so we're like, oh, that'd be cool. Like, let's start in Iceland. Why not? And we had a couple days there. We happened to show up for Iceland National Day, which was really cool experience because that wasn't planned at all. We stayed in Reykjavik though, and we basically did tours out of Reykjavik to see the landscape. And Iceland is like just a whole other world. It's so cool. Like the waterfalls, there's a fault line there that you can go see, and just a really cool mountains and beautiful scenery. But I think my favorite thing that we did there and what I would recommend is definitely going to the Blue Lagoon.
Yeah, definitely a popular thing to do.
I would say do it too. Like sometimes we like to steer away from like the big tourist traps, or Ryan does for sure. And sometimes I'm on board with that. Sometimes I'm not, but I would still go back to the Blue Lagoon if we went back to Iceland.
Yeah. The landscape there is crazy. Like, it's just like, it's so alien. Made me think that like, oh, I should have paid more attention in geography class.
Right.
Yeah. So my recommendation for Iceland is definitely check out one of the Icelandic hot dogs.
Ew, why?
Do you remember what the place is called?
No, they're everywhere though.
It's funny because if you listen to our Iceland episode, we talk about it, so you can find out more. But there's a lot of like world's best stuff in Iceland.
Yeah. And I would say go to the Blue Lagoon over eat a hot dog for sure. Maybe you can do both. Grab a hot dog and then go to the Blue Lagoon. So next up on our list is Ireland, and we're gonna bang off Northern Ireland and Ireland at the same time. 2 for 1 special. Yeah. So let's start with Northern Ireland. I've actually been to Northern Ireland twice. I went on a backpacking trip where I went to Wales and England with a friend. So that was one of the other times I went to London as well. And one of the reasons why I convinced her to go to Northern Ireland is because the first time that Ryan and I went, we just went to Belfast and we didn't really do enough research. And I realized that we missed Giant's Causeway, which is one of the most spectacular things I've ever seen.
Yeah, we found out about it when we got there. And then we're like, oh, I don't have enough time. And then later on, like looked it up and we're like, oh no, what have we done?
If we're like down in like Dublin and I'm like, we should really try and do Giant's Causeway. And it's like, oh yeah, that was like a couple hours outside of Belfast, like on the northern coast.
Yeah.
So that would be my recommendation for Northern Ireland for sure, is get to Giant's Causeway. It's another thing that's super touristy and you can book a day trip with it, but I would definitely go again.
It was funny prepping for this episode and thinking back to our time in Belfast and realizing like, oh wow, we really sucked at traveling right then when we started, because we were relying on this like really shitty guidebook that didn't have that much stuff in it. So we missed so much cool stuff, like finding out more about the history of the conflict in Belfast in Northern Ireland was something I would have loved to have done. And we just kind of like walked around and then like went to a bar. Granted, the bar was cool, but definitely missed a lot. So my recommendation for Belfast would probably just be to give it a chance, like go there, be there for a while, and learn about it and the surrounding area. Don't just go. I think a lot less people go to Belfast than go to Dublin, but it's definitely worth getting up to Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I think so as well. And also, like, I think that Giant's Causeway is 100% something that I would recommend. But I would also say learn about the history of Northern Ireland, because a lot, like, I didn't know about it until I went there. Like, the fact that there's actually, like, a Northern Ireland and an Ireland that are two separate passports and their money's slightly different and they are very different places. And there's a lot of really, really interesting history in Northern Ireland. And I think that it's always important to learn about those things, for me at least, when I go to these places. Yeah,
it's funny because it's one of those things that after you go and kind of learn about it, you kind of take for granted. Whereas before going, you're like, oh, there's a Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland. I don't really understand what the conflict's about. Like, I don't really know what's going on there.
Right.
So we went down to Ireland right after and went Dublin and Cork were only 2 stops, with a day trip out to the Cliffs of Moher. Dublin was a really cool city. The thing that stands out to me from our entire time with Ireland is just drinking a ton of dark beer. So we went on a Guinness factory tour or Guinness brewery tour, and then plenty of pubs to drink some stout.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing that stands out the most to me is the Cliffs of Moher. They're 800-foot cliffs on the west coast of Ireland, and I just remember looking at them being like, damn, this is cool. Like, you know, it's one of those moments where I was like, I want to do this forever. Like, I want to do this travel thing forever and like see the world, because there's these hidden gems like all over the world that you don't hear about all the time. And the Cliffs of Moher are popular, but they're not, you know, the most popular thing that you hear about in Europe by any means. And I think that was one of my favorite day trips of our entire trip.
Yeah. And another thing is Temple Bar is kind of like, it's a really touristy area, and we often like to avoid touristy area, but that one in particular is just like a cool place to be. Like, regardless of if it's like mostly tourists, like the bars are cool, the live music's awesome. Definitely worth checking out, even if you're skeptical of touristy stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And so moving into
Italia.
Oh, I was going to do Indo first. So I'm going to field this one because Ryan hasn't been to Indonesia yet, although it's on our upcoming Asia trip at some point. But I went to Indonesia, Bali specifically, in 2015 to do my yoga teacher training. So I spent most of my time in Canggu, which is a little bit north of Seminyak, on sort of like the southwest-ish corner of the island. And then I also made my way inland to Ubud for a couple days at the end of my trip, just to practice yoga and eat food and hang out. And one of the things that I really loved the most about Indonesia was it's really close to Australia. And so there's a ton of Australian expats there, which means that there's a lot of really cool restaurants and stuff that are owned by Australians. So they've kind of got this like higher quality of food, but then they employ like all Indonesian people. So it's like really good for the economy. And there was a couple of restaurants in Canggu and then Ubud as well that were just like so amazing. And so like I was all about the food while I was there, and I would definitely recommend that. I would also recommend there's a volcano hike that you can do just outside of Ubud, and they pick you up at 2 a.m. So it's like, that's a hard sell to get up at 2 a.m. to go hike a volcano, but it was 100% worth it. I was back by 10 a.m. ready to nap, and I'd like already hiked up a crater. It was so cool. One of the coolest things I've ever done.
Awesome. So next on the list is Italy, which was the same European backpacking trip. And our trip there looked like we went down to Milan, from Milan up to the Cinque Terre, or however you pronounce that, over to Florence, down to Rome, and then out. So,
and I would actually like to just note that I've also been to Italy once before that as well. And
let the record show.
I went to Venice and Pisa as well.
And so Italy like has a ton of good sites, beautiful scenery, and then the great thing about Italy is that you get to like intersperse all of this sightseeing with pizza and gelato.
Yeah, and pasta, of course.
Yeah, but so much pizza and so much gelato.
Yeah. And I think that I have two recommendations. I mean, I think that Rome is like an obvious place that you should go in Italy. And I say that because there's so much cool history there. Like we were mentioning before, like Roman history is just so amazing. Seeing the Colosseum, is it the Pantheon that's in Rome? The Parthenon that's in Greece?
I think so, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, seeing the Pantheon, pretty sure that's right. And walking around and just checking out like the old churches, like seeing the Vatican is really, really neat. But I also really love Cinque Terre. Cinque Terre is quiet. It's on the coast. You can take the train from one end to the other. You can hike along it. Just kind of a different pace from Rome. And I think that they really complement each other nicely.
Yeah, Cinque Terre is a highlight from all the places we've been, all the things we've done. Mm-hmm. Just an amazing hike. And then my one recommendation is a gelato place in Florence called Grom that we went to probably like 6 times in like 5 days. It's spectacular.
All about the gelato. And so moving into the next country, it's Jamaica. I feel like we should have some little music, some Jamaican music there. And Jamaica is where we went when we finished up South America before we went home. So we wanted to vacation from our vacation before we made our way back into real life. And Jamaica was really like the perfect place to do it. We spent 5 days outside of Montego Bay on this little coastal resort doing a yoga retreat. And then we made our way a little bit closer to Montego Bay, a little bit more inland, and stayed at a beautiful Airbnb there and just kind of like chilled out for a week, which was awesome.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who go to Jamaica do the resort thing. Like that's very popular there, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I think a lot of people do that because they're motivated by a little bit of fear or anxiety. Like there are some dangerous spots in Jamaica, but we had a really great experience like getting out and exploring the areas of the island and just of the city of Montego Bay that were kind of unknown for tourist spots. So go and check that stuff out. It's really cool. And then the recommendation that I'll add is to eat a bunch of soursop.
Yeah, soursop is delicious. I would definitely echo that recommendation. And then also echo what you said before about, try and stay somewhere that's not a resort. You could find some beautiful Airbnbs somewhere on the island where it's just like, I don't know, just as spectacular and more of like a local visit. Like one day we went out with this Rastafarian dude. He took us to waterfalls and he took us to eat sugarcane and he took us to eat like some of the local dishes. And I thought that was really, really fun. And that's something that we wouldn't have done had we been on some all-inclusive at a resort. Yeah,
definitely. So next up on the list is Laos, which we also went to in 2011 after going from Vietnam over to Laos. So we went from Luang Prabang, Vientiane, Vang Vieng, Vientiane. Just the 3 cities, pretty quick little jaunt through the place. So what kind of stands out for you from Laos?
Well, we did the river tubing, which is no longer a thing. And we've talked about it in a couple different episodes, kind of in our ethical tourism episode, and then also just in our episode on Laos. That's not something I would recommend. I would actually recommend putting your money into the economy in a different way, probably in a more sustainable way. I would definitely recommend going to Luang Prabang though and hanging out. There's a couple like really cool bars and cafes that you can go to. And I think that was something that really stands out for me is kind of seeing the culture there and been kind of experiencing like the expat sort of nightlife.
Yeah, and I think for me, the recommendation is something that we didn't do, but I would have liked to have done, is to get off that common trail, which is like people go Luang Prabang, Bang Vian, Vientiane out. But there's like so much cool stuff to do in that country if you get off that trail. And that's why we're hoping to go back and explore that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the scenery in Laos is some of the most beautiful scenery I've ever seen. I feel like I keep saying this in this episode, but we've just been to so many beautiful places and I just love Mother Nature. I would love to do hiking there and just explore the outdoors. And I think that there was a bit of fear involved and a bit of like discomfort just because it was such an uncertain place for us at that time. And we were like, we don't know what to do. We'll just go to the other cities that everyone else goes to. And I would really recommend as well getting off of that sort of, I don't know what you call it, and it's called like the Gringo Trail in South America, but the equivalent of the Gringo Trail in Southeast Asia. And so the next country that we're going to move into is Mexico. And Ryan actually hasn't been to Mexico thus far, so I'm going to field this one. I've actually only been to Mexico on all-inclusive vacations. And so I've been to kind of the popular places like Cancun and Playa del Carmen and Puerto Vallarta and the Mayan Riviera and the places that are just very typical of people going. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Like we were just talking about with Jamaica, it's fine. I think that choosing how you want to travel should obviously be something that you choose based on what you're looking for out of a trip. I think that for me, all-inclusives don't really like serve my needs as a traveler anymore. And so my biggest recommendation would be to, even if you are staying at an inclusive, get out of your resort, get off your hotel strip, and really experience the culture. Because I think that that's when you really get to know a country and when you really get to see what it's all about. And so that's probably my biggest recommendation with Mexico. And eat tacos. Ovs.
Yeah, all sorts of tacos.
Yeah.
And next up is Morocco, which also isn't really the most extensive trip we've taken. We took a day trip over from the Gibraltar neighborhood over to Morocco. And it's kind of funny because we were talking about this the other day. I just had a weird deja vu moment.
Yeah.
And just spent a day touring around Tangier, which was a crazy experience.
Yeah. And so we basically like took the boat over early in the morning, which was like hectic. It was like you cross over to Africa basically while you're still in Spain. And you kind of get a taste for what that's like. And then you cross over on this boat and you get off and people are immediately hawking you things and trying to sell things because it's like, that's, you know, they're ready for all these tourists who are going to spend the day there. And the biggest mistake that we made was we actually converted money before we went. And I think we talked about this on our Morocco Gibraltar episode about how like definitely don't convert your money because I lost some money out of that entire process. So that would be one of my recommendations. Don't convert money before you go. 2, spend longer there than just a day because you really don't get a feel for a place in just a day. And 3, drink Moroccan mint tea because it's delicious. What about you?
I think my recommendation is just a lesson that we've learned as we travel, but just like don't necessarily be greedy about all the places that you want to go. Going to Morocco is definitely on my list. It's somewhere I want to explore. And when we were there, we were like, oh, we're so close. We just got to go. So we went for a day and I don't feel like it does justice to it. So I think had I been in a similar situation, I might have been like, oh no, let's hold off. We'll go explore it at some point in the future. We don't need to go now and just do this tour on one day and not get an experience that's super authentic.
Yeah, definitely. I would echo that for sure. And so moving into the ends, we're going to go into the Netherlands. And
so we went just to Amsterdam together, and then Amanda had previously been to Amsterdam and
Den Haag.
So, I mean, Amsterdam's got a solid reputation for itself, and it definitely lives up to that. We had a pretty crazy evening there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've had a couple crazy evenings there. It's just like a crazy place.
A lot of drunk fries with mayonnaise on them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a very beautiful city. Like the canals, the bikes, the moderate temperature, the buildings. Like I remember walking around being like, oh, it'd be cool to live here.
Yeah. And so something that I would recommend is finding a balance between sort of the like party nightlife that's in Amsterdam, like the red light district type stuff, and experiencing everything else, because there's a really like active bike culture. You can go out and see the tulips. There's windmills. There's a lot of really interesting history with the Anne Frank house. And so really finding this side of Amsterdam and of the Netherlands that is not just this marijuana, sex show, pub crawl side.
So my recommendation is to go get a bunch of joints and head down to the red light district. No, that's not my recommendation. So one place in particular is the American bookstore there. It's a really cool English bookstore that's got like a really well curated selection of books. One of the best bookstores I've ever been to. So next up on the list is New Zealand. So we went to New Zealand at the very end of our 2011 backpacking trip. We flew from Cairns over to Christchurch. Yeah. And then when we were in New Zealand, we did a tour with Stray that took us kind of all around the southern island, and then Rotorua, Wellington, and Auckland on the northern island.
Yeah. And so Stray, for those of you who don't know, is sort of like a hop on, hop off bus style tour. So you basically choose how long you want to be in places. You plan like your pickups and drop offs through like your online portal. And there's lots of different companies, especially in New Zealand, but I mean all over the world. I know we have them here in Canada, and then Australia has them as well. And I really loved getting around that way. I thought it was nice after organizing all of our transportation to just have this like one fee that we paid. We could go online, book our bus. Our bus came to our hostel, dropped us off at a hostel, and then we had like a couple days in each place to explore.
Yeah, I thought it was nice after doing a van rental in Australia to do that in New Zealand, but I think that switching those two would have worked really well to do, because we were on more of like a straightforward route in Australia, just up the East Coast. Having a van and the freedom to move around in New Zealand would have been really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
But we both really fell in love with New Zealand. It's since leaving, it's been somewhere where we've thought about moving and are still kind of toying with that idea about going to live there long term. What would you say your recommendations are for New Zealand?
I would say go to Queenstown on the South Island and do some bungee jumping or some extreme activity. Specifically, I really liked the Nevis bungee jump. I think that was a highlight for me on our New Zealand trip for sure, and like something that's been like a highlight of my life, I think, was just doing this incredible bungee jump.
Yeah, and my recommendation specifically is Ferg Burger in Queenstown, some of the best burgers we've ever had. And then more broadly, just while you're there, just appreciating all the delicious little meat pies that you can get all over the place. Those things are awesome. And I don't know why they're not as much of a thing yet in North America.
Yeah, I mean, we've got so many Australians and New Zealanders over here that
Someone needs to open up a pie shop.
Yeah, business idea. And so moving into Peru. Peru is a country that I've been to twice. It was the first place that I ever went in South America. I went with a girlfriend back in 2012, and I came back and was like, oh my God, Ryan, we need to go to South America. And that kind of spurred our entire 6-month journey down there. And then it was the last country that we went to in South America. And we spent about a month there going from the east. So we came from Bolivia. So like
Puno.
Yeah, so Puno, which is the Peruvian side of Lake Titicaca. Clearly don't recommend that. Into Cusco, Arequipa, Huacachina, up towards Lima.
Yes. So Peru was one of our favorite countries in South America. Maybe less so from like I'd love to live here standpoint, but from a traveling standpoint, there's just like so much cool stuff to do, from amazing food in Lima, Cusco, and Arequipa to going to Machu Picchu. Some of the hiking and trekking that's there is awesome. We did an ayahuasca retreat in Peru, and that was a big moment. We have an episode on that if you want to check more about that. So yeah, really cool place to visit. That definitely should be on the top of your list if you're going to South America. Mm-hmm. What are your recommendations for people going to Peru?
I think I'm just gonna like be obvious and say Machu Picchu. I've been twice and I would definitely go again. I think that Machu Picchu lives up to the hype, and it definitely exceeded my expectations, and my expectations were high. So I'm not necessarily doing the Inca trail, like finding something that's going to be fun for you. We did an Inca jungle trek, which was really fun. And then also you can just go up, you can just hike up from Aguas Calientes, or you can just take the bus up. And I think that regardless of what you choose to do, Machu Picchu is an amazing experience. What about you?
I think my recommendation is just to like make time to hang out and enjoy the food. I think some of my favorite moments being in Arequipa, there was some really good restaurants there. Cusco, we spent a little bit extra there, did Spanish school, and we were able to eat at a ton of good restaurants. And then in Lima, that was kind of like our main focus. So just getting ready for some awesome restaurants.
Yeah, I like how all of your recommendations are about food.
Yeah, or also if you're bus traveling around, there is an amazing bus line called Cruz del Sur.
Oh, yeah.
Super, super high quality buses. So if you're planning your trip, definitely consider busing.
Yeah. And so our next P country is Portugal.
Portugal.
And we went to Portugal after we went to Spain in 2011. And we started with Lagos in the south and then made our way up to Lisbon, which is more in central, before heading out of Portugal. So we just went to those two places.
Yeah, Lagos is definitely somewhere I think that's kind of like stuck in our hearts.
Yeah,
It's a
for
fun
sure.
place to be. Portugal in general has some of the best hostels in the world are there, and amazing food and just really affordable. So I think that it's like a must visit if you're backpacking Western Europe, and kind of like slightly overlooked by a lot of people.
Yeah, I would also definitely recommend Lagos and just, chilling out maybe for even a week. I think that's what we did, hanging out on the beach, eating all the good food that's there, and maybe doing surf lessons or yoga. It's kind of one of those places where you can just like settle into a good hostel because there's a bunch of those, and meet some cool people and hang out.
Yeah, so my recommendation is just go to Lagos.
Mine as well.
So next up on the list is Scotland.
Yeah, Scotland was, I guess, the third country that we went to on our backpacking trip in 2011. We made our way up to Scotland after England, and we went to Glasgow and Edinburgh, and then made a trip up to the Scottish Highlands for a day. Yeah,
going to Scotland was cool for me because I'm kind of, Scottish by heritage, I guess. My dad's from Scotland, and that's the family. So it was cool to go back there and see some of the places where I had relatives and kind of have a bit of like a Scottish experience. As far as the places we went, Edinburgh was just an awesome city that I would love to go back to.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. My recommendation would definitely be Edinburgh, just from stepping out of the train station and seeing a massive castle on the hill. And then J.K. Rowling actually got her inspiration for Harry Potter and Hogwarts from the Edinburgh Castle. And there's a cafe that you can go there where you can go see like where she used to be.
Yeah, where she used to work.
Where she used to work. And being a Harry Potter nerd, I would definitely recommend going checking that out.
Yeah, and then the other thing we did when we were there was just gorge ourselves on toffee.
Well, you did.
And there's this other weird food that I grew up eating. It's called Edinburgh Castle Rock, which is essentially, it looks like sidewalk chalk, but it's made of sugar. And I really enjoyed it growing up. So going to there, I was just like, oh yeah, let's get down with some of this Castle Rock. I don't think people who aren't from like British origins really appreciate that though.
Yeah, I feel like it's like Vegemite. Like
but,
the equivalent.
But it's sugar.
But the sugar version. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of that. But
yeah, the toffee.
Toffee's yum though.
That was good.
And so next up is Spain.
Yeah, so Spain was actually the very first destination that we booked something in 2000. Was it even 2010 maybe before our trip in 2011?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. It was either late 2010 or early 2011.
But we booked Running of the Bulls. So we booked a hostel there. And we're like, oh shit, we're doing this. We're going. So we flew from Ireland to Barcelona, went to Pamplona before kind of returning and doing like basically a U shape of Spain. Quite a few cities. It's probably the most time we spent in any one country.
Yeah, I think we were there for like an entire month, which was basically like, what the hell? That's like how we travel now, but it's like, it was crazy that we spent a month there because we were like so fast traveling then. Yeah, it's just an awesome country, from the kind of like laid back attitude of the people to the
beaches, places like Ibiza, where you can get cool experiences. I look back really fondly on Spain and would love to spend more time there in the future.
Yeah. And so what would you recommend?
Oof. It's tough to pick one recommendation for Spain because there's so much cool stuff we did. Right. I guess my recommendation would be like, spend a while in Spain.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great place to spend a month.
Right. We could even spend longer there. Like, you can do like a walk across Spain in the north as well. Like go to Basque.
Yeah, there's so
country.
much stuff that we didn't do. Like
Madrid.
San Sebastian, Madrid.
Yeah. I would say like if you're in Spain during the right time or you want to plan a trip at a certain time, going to the Running the Bulls was a really, really cool event to be a part of. And then outside of that, I really liked Sevilla in the south. I thought Sevilla was really cool. And to give context for that, it's in episode 2 of Star Wars. Queen Amidala's palace is that, and it's cool because you go in the center, and the way they actually filmed it was they doubled it because it's only kind of like a half sort of courtyard area, but super cool.
Yeah. So my recommendations would be eat lots of tapas, drink lots of sangria.
Go to Valencia.
And
Valencia's
also
cool.
Learn some Spanish before you go.
Yeah, that's
because we didn't do that
recommendation.
and we felt like idiots.
Well, it's just like when the only word you know is pollo, you're like searching the menu being like, okay, something with pollo because I know I'm going to get chicken.
And then we just ended up eating kebab. So much kebab.
Right. Yeah. Learn Spanish.
So next up on the list is Switzerland. We went only to Bern and Interlaken, but it stuck out as one of our favorite countries from Europe. After traveling Western and Southern Europe, going back into the mountains, swimming in a freshwater river in Bern, and getting like cool, refreshing mountain air and doing some amazing hiking was kind of like a taste of home for us, but it was like home plus because it's Switzerland.
Yeah, definitely. My recommendation would be hike. Find like anything, like hiking waterfalls, hiking the bigger mountains. There's so much cool infrastructure where you can just get some like really amazing hiking in, but just go experience the Swiss Alps.
Yeah, so like you said, really good infrastructure. So one of the hikes we did there, we took a train up to...
I think it's called like Schneegeplatz. I'm totally butchering that. I'm sorry.
But yeah, you can do stuff like taking a train up to the top of one mountain.
Did you just ask that just so I'd say it?
Walking along a ridge to another place, or you can take a gondola down and a train back. So you kind of just get to walk in like the top glorious view of a ridge of a mountain and not have to worry about going up and down. Really cool hiking. And then one activity that sticks out for me was canyoning in Interlaken. So if you've never heard of canyoning before, it's basically like making your way down a canyon. So it's a mix of rappelling, cliff jumping, just kind of floating down the river, or like sliding down natural slides. Super cool experience.
Yeah, that was really, really fun. I would definitely recommend that as well. And so the next countries that we're going to talk about are Slovenia and Slovakia. And I haven't been to those ones, so Ryan's going to head this one.
So Slovakia, I've only really taken a train through. So it's on the list, but it's dubious.
Dubious.
So my recommendation for Slovakia is to actually get off a train and check
explore.
It out.
What about Slovenia?
Yeah, so Slovenia, I was really excited about going just because it's kind of like a weird country that you don't hear much about. But Ljubljana, which is the capital city, which is where I spent about a week and most of my time, is just a super picturesque city. It's a really nice size of city. You kind of come in from the outskirts and it looks, every country in Eastern Europe has these ominous, communist style generic apartment buildings, and the outsides of town don't look great, but getting into the center of Ljubljana, it's a beautiful river, cobblestone streets, amazing restaurants, cool cafes, a big castle on a hill to check out. Just an awesome city, and it's really affordable. If you're going to that neighborhood, I think it's a place that can get overlooked, but definitely worth checking out. And so my recommendation for Slovenia is just like spend a while in Ljubljana. Don't be on like a checklist. If you're doing Central Europe and you think, oh, I got to go Prague, got to go Budapest, make room for Ljubljana.
Cool. Yeah, I love that. And so moving on, we're getting into Thailand. And I mean, what do you say about Thailand? Like, we got there after Europe. So we were talking about recently how it was probably one of our biggest culture shocks, like getting into Southeast Asia and being like, holy shit, where are we? Like, this is a whole different part of the world. It's really different from where we're from over in Canada.
Almost like a different world. Like, things just work so differently.
Right. And so we arrived in Thailand and we got into Bangkok. And then actually from Bangkok, we made our way into Cambodia, as Ryan mentioned earlier, because it was flooding. But we did actually come back to Thailand later on in our trip. We kind of made a loop around the like mainland Southeast Asia and made our way down to the islands. And we went to Koh Phangan for the full moon party, Koh Phi Phi and Koh Tao before making our way back up through, where did we go? Not Rayleigh. Krabi. Yeah. Going into Krabi and then back to Bangkok for a second time. And I think the thing that I love the most and that I would recommend would be scuba diving in Koh Tao.
It was funny being in Thailand because we started there and then went to Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. So we started and we're kind of like, whoa, it's crazy here. And then by the time we got back, like 4 weeks later, after visiting those other countries, which are less developed, we were like, wow, it's so developed here. I remember getting back to Bangkok our final time and being like, wow, cool mall, like train, like there's so much infrastructure and development here. So that was a funny experience. And I think my recommendation is to just enjoy the food. That's kind of vague and abstract. I'll think of something more concrete.
No, it's not though. Like going out onto the street and going to the street vendors and exploring the Thai food, like pad Thai, green curry, papaya salad, coconut sticky rice with mango. Like there's so much yummy stuff, like the lassies, the smoothies. Thai food is spectacular. I think that's a great recommendation.
Yeah, I've actually got 2 recommendations. So I got really sick there and for some reason didn't want to go to the doctor. The Thai medical system, well, at least the version that you can access as a tourist, is fantastic. So if you get sick, don't worry about checking that out. And then 2, if you're in Bangkok or one of the other large cities, go check out like they're called like VIP movies or some other name, but they have like really high class movies that are quite affordable in US dollars. Where we had a kind of a private pod with reclining seats,
popcorn delivery.
Yes, popcorn delivery. Just
I think we got like champagne
experience.
before our movie. Yeah, it was great. But just like the luxury malls in general are really cool to check out. It's one of the things that I'm most excited for on our upcoming trip to Asia.
Going to the mall.
Yeah.
Let's go to the mall.
Let's not sing that again.
So next up on the list is Uruguay.
Uruguay. And Uruguay was the country that we spent the least amount of time in South America. We went in between Brazil. So after we bussed from Florianopolis through to Montevideo in Uruguay and then made our way into...
We just went from there to Buenos Aires.
No, we went to that other town.
Oh shit, yeah, Colonia.
Yeah, went to Colonia and then from Colonia took a boat over towards Buenos Aires.
Yeah, I really loved Uruguay though.
Yeah, I did as well. Like it was just a little bit like Brazil is kind of hectic. Brazil is cool, but it's hectic. And going to Uruguay, it was like calm and more chilled out. And it was more like, just felt more relaxing.
Yeah, Montevideo is a really nice sized city. It's like not as crazy as Buenos Aires, but still like a major capital city. Uruguay is quite developed. For a while, it was like the most developed country in South America. I think Chile might have passed it. I could be completely wrong about that though. But yeah, so you can kind of, after Brazil, you're kind of like craving for some of those like home style amenities. So Uruguay, you can get a lot of those. What's your recommendation for Uruguay?
That's a really good question. So the first thing that popped into mind was how we went to the market and we got like big slabs of meat. I got chicken, you got beef, parilla, and
parilla.
Massive cups of wine. I'm not a meat eater anymore, so I don't know. That is really fun though. I would recommend doing that.
Yeah, that was a really cool. We got just gigantic glasses of wine.
Biggest slab of meat. It was like, oh, here's half a chicken. And I was like, holy shit, I can't eat half a chicken. Like we had leftovers for like 2 days, I feel like. But we actually rented bikes and we biked down there. And that was really fun. Like, I think it was nice to just kind of like chill out and slow down a little bit, which is what I think of when I think of Uruguay.
Yeah. The parilla was definitely super cool. One interesting thing about that area is that like you're Uruguay kind of has a lot more in common with like Buenos Aires than a lot of other parts of Argentina have in common with Buenos Aires. Same language, some of the cultural things like mate is very popular there. So my recommendation while you're there is to like jump into mate culture, get yourself a little mate, get some yerba, get the bombilla, and just do your thing with that stuff.
Just be a local. Yeah, that's a great recommendation. And so our other U country is the United States of America.
USA.
And I mean,
right in the chant.
No, I'm not going to.
You must hate America then.
I just love the United States. I think that.
Well, yeah, I would like to add some nuance. The country, but not the government.
Right. Yeah. That's why I kind of paused there. I do love like the cities. There's so many cool cities in the US between like San Francisco and New York and LA and Austin, Atlanta, just Charleston, so many, New Orleans, so many cool places. And then there's also spectacular nature. Like the national parks are just out of this world down there, and there's desert and there's forest and there's mountains. So I don't know. I really love the United States. What about you?
Yeah, same for me. So many cool cities, so many cool places, so many awesome people. Like after living in Atlanta, it's kind of coincidence, but like through that move, but also just some other like stuff, like many of our friend circles, many of the people in our friend circles are like our better friends are now from the States. So yeah, really love American people, American cities, all that stuff. Just wish their government was a little bit more chilled out. Yeah. Yeah. What's your recommendation? We've done so much stuff. Like we lived in the South for a while. We've done a lot of road trips. On the West Coast, we did a big road trip. If you've been listening,
I don't think I can just pick one. Why don't we pick top 3?
Okay. The first thing that pops into my mind as something that's kind of American because we don't have it here, but would be Chipotle.
Oh yeah. Good
Which
one.
after going to Austin, I get that like, oh, Chipotle's not that great, but it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
Whole Foods. Spectacular.
Yeah. And your third one?
Yeah, Portland stands out as a city. It's so tough to pick because there's so much cool stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it's just an awesome place to be.
Okay. I'm going to try and just narrow 3 down.
Okay.
Arches National Park in Utah is one of the most spectacular places I've ever been. It just blew my mind in a whole different way. I was like, I don't know, just happy the entire day. And I could have spent so much time there just exploring every single arch that was there and taking photos and learning about the geography. So that was definitely a massive highlight for me. Some of the bigger cities I really like New Orleans for Mardi Gras is really cool. San Francisco is a really cool city.
Is this the count as one?
Yeah, this is one. Atlanta, I think that I need to put Atlanta on there because I fell so in love with that city while I was there and the people that are down in the South. And then what else did I love about the US? I mean, you said like some of my favorite things: Whole Foods, Chipotle,
Arden's Garden.
Oh, Arden's Garden. Sure, that can
which
be
is
my
a
third.
Juice company based in Atlanta.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know.
It's
yeah,
like
maybe
in the
my
South
recommendation
as well.
would be Atlanta. Great city.
Yeah, it's a great city. It's like a hidden gem down in the South. But even just like the smaller things is something that I also really like. Like I loved going to Asheville in North Carolina. I thought that was really cool, like small city to check out. And it's somewhere that you don't really hear about when you're, I mean, even in the North.
Yeah. The density of stuff, like being able to go over to Charleston, go over to Savannah, go up to Asheville, go to Nashville,
Memphis.
Yeah, even New Orleans, not too far away. Like just the amount of cool things that are within your area is something that's really cool coming from Canada where it's like there's nothing around. And then just the affordability of so much stuff, like being able to fly place to place for
Oh my gosh, yeah, Spirit Airlines.
For quite a low amount of money. And like kind of new services that take so long to get to Canada, they're all in the States right away.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, yeah. National parks, Glacier National Park, Yosemite, Crater
I think you already
Lake.
said those.
Did I say them though?
Yeah. So on to the next one, Vietnam.
Second last one, stay with us. So we went to Vietnam after we went to Cambodia, and we started in the south down in Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City, and we made our way up north towards Hanoi, where we went to Ha Long Bay with a few stops in between. And something that I really liked about Vietnam was Vietnamese coffee and pho, or pho as we call it over here incorrectly. Those were two things that I was like not really, I don't know, I didn't really grow up, like I grew up in a small town in Alberta, like we didn't really experience ethnic food. And I feel like going to Asia was like, whoa, there's like Asian food that's not Chinese. Like this is really cool.
Yeah. So I think my recommendation from Vietnam was like, maybe a lesson that we learned. We tried to pack way too much stuff into 15 days.
Right.
So giving yourself some time to really get to know some places, I think would have made our trip a lot better. So that's my kind of recommendation.
Maybe not taking night buses. I don't know. It's the most affordable way to get around, man, but they suck.
I don't think it was worth saving that money.
All right. The last country on the list is Wales. And Ryan hasn't been to Wales, but I helped one of my really good friends move over there. She did her master's over in Cardiff, and that's when I went to Belfast the second time and up to Bath and Stonehenge. So we had really, really fun 2 weeks. And I think the thing that I like about Wales the most is the people. Welsh people are different from like the English, the Scottish, and the Irish. They're a really friendly people. It's a really great culture. I just felt like everyone was really helpful. And
are you saying that the English people and Scottish people weren't?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I don't have experience in that same situation, but I just like was really blown away by like the hospitality and the like welcoming of the Welsh people. And I think that like, I guess my biggest recommendation would be go to Wales, because I think that people really forget about it. Like I think the way we did the first time, it's like England, Scotland, Ireland are super cool. They're talked about. Wales is like this small country that people are like, oh, Wales, there's nothing down there. But Cardiff is a really beautiful city. The coastline is amazing. There's lots of beautiful countryside, nice food. If
you had 3 weeks in the UK, would you, and you'd never been before, would you include Wales on that itinerary?
Yes.
So,
well, knowing what I know now, I don't know. That's an ambiguous question. Knowing what I know now, if I was talking to somebody who had never been before, I would recommend Wales.
So you'd say maybe go like London, Cardiff, and then go from there up to Scotland.
I think Wales is south. So maybe.
Oh, really?
I think maybe. I might be geographically incorrect though.
I don't know. It's so small anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say add Wales for sure.
Cool. Yeah, it's been fun going through this list, and I'm noticing that we're just missing D, K, O, Q, R, and Z.
Yeah.
Oh, and Y.
Oh, yeah. We need to get to Yemen.
And Zambia.
Zimbabwe.
Maybe not Zimbabwe.
Qatar. Russia. What's K?
Oman. Kazakhstan.
Okay.
And Denmark.
Yeah. Okay.
Then we'll boom alphabetized. So thank you for listening to this episode. It's been a long one.
It's been long for us too.
Congratulations. You now have downloaded everything we know about the world into your mind. If you're new to the show, we've got episodes on most of the countries we talked about here. So definitely dig through the feed and check those out. They're evergreen content.
Right, exactly.
And they're not deciduous.
And as always, thank you so much for listening to the show. We really appreciate all of our listeners and everyone who writes into us and everyone who follows along on social media and all that jazz.
All right, see you guys next time. To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at World Wanderers 1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.